this as he explores the spiritual tradition of yoga as it has been practiced and refined for thousands of years in India.
Now, what I'm going to be talking about this morning is yoga. And the idea of yoga is already given in the name yoga. It comes from a root, yug, that means to yoke. Yoke something to something else. And what is being yoked is our ego consciousness, the aham consciousness, to the source of consciousness. Now, just as the idea of deity in these perennial traditions greatly differs from our idea of deity, so does the idea of consciousness. In speaking of deities, in the terms that are proper to these mythologically grounded traditions, I say the deity is a personification of the energy. It's a personification of an energy that informs life, all life, your life, the world's life. The nature of the personification will be determined by historical circumstances. The personification is folk. The energy is human. And so deities proceed from the energies, and they are the messengers and vehicles, so to say, of the energies. Whereas our idea of deity is that deity is a fact, and it's from that fact that the energies proceed. Topsy-turvy roundabout. Likewise, with respect to consciousness, our notion is that the brain is the source of consciousness, something of that sort. The traditional idea is that the brain is a function of consciousness. Consciousness is first, and the brain is an organ that encapsulates consciousness and focuses it in a certain direction, on the direction of time and space knowledge, which is secondary knowledge. And the notion that we are all manifestations of that transcendent consciousness which goes beyond all our powers to think and to name is the basic idea of all of this. Now, in our Western thinking, there have been moments when this has come in against what might be called the mainstream philosophy or the school philosophers. In the Middle Age, long before the time of the Middle Ages, we have Dionysius the Areopagite, who is a mystical philosopher. And his philosophy is picked up in the 8th and 9th centuries by Scotus Erigena in Ireland. And this is a Gnostic philosopher, magnificent concepts. In the High Middle Ages, Meister Eckhart, he uses the complicated concretizing language of Christianity, but he blows it apart, and you have the recognition of the relationship of the deity to the knower of the deity. And then you have people like Giordano Bruno, who was burned in the main plaza of Rome in 1600 for saying these things. But then a great moment happened in Renaissance Italy. Cosimo de' Medici invited Marsilio Ficino to translate a text that had been brought from Byzantium by a Byzantine monk. And this was the Greek text of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Hermetic philosophy of the first centuries AD, contemporary with early Christianity, but in the pagan terminology. And when this was completed, the excitement in the whole world of the arts was enormous. Botticelli's full of all this, and this wonderful flowering of Renaissance art is eloquent of these very ideas that I'm talking about. Then in later times, we have Immanuel Kant. There are two kinds of philosophies in the world. There's English philosophy, where nobody really understood what Kant was saying, and there's the philosophies that we find just implicit, for example, in the Middle European systems. What Kant recognized in his critique of pure reason was that all of our knowledge, all of our experience is conditioned by the organs of experience and the organs of knowledge. And a priori, primary, antecedent to our experience of anything is our knowledge of time and space. Everything comes to us in a field of time and space. And in that wonderful paper of his called the Foundation of Metaphysics, he asked this question: how is it that we can make determinations for relationships in space here and know that these will work in space there? He says it's because the laws of space are right in our own mind. Well, this struck me like dynamite. The flight around the moon, but just before the one where Armstrong's foot came down on the moon. Ground control, Houston asked, who's navigating now? And the answer that came back, and I heard it with amazement, was Newton. Now, the laws that would work in that space up there where nobody had ever been before were known so perfectly that it was possible to bring that little module back within a mile of a boat in the Pacific Ocean from around the moon. And no matter how far these space vehicles go out into space, we've enveloped it, we know it. But when Armstrong's foot came down on the moon, nobody knew how deeply it was going to sink in the moon dust. That's how posteriori knowledge. But the framing order of knowledge to which all of our experiences come, this we already know. But what is the thing that we're coming to know through time and space? Is it a thing? No, things are in time and space. Wow, you've gone into the transcendent there. So he calls this transcendental aesthetic. And then after you've seen everything, you begin thinking about it, and the laws of your thinking are what determine what you can think. These are the laws of logic, the categories. And you can't even think of anything that doesn't fit in those. So you're enclosed. This is Maya, exactly. And it was Schopenhauer who first recognized that the Indian concept of Maya and Kant's concept of the forms of sensibility and the categories of logic were equivalent. So in his World as Will and Idea, he's able to talk about Western thinking in terms of Oriental thinking. The two come right together there. Nietzsche picked this up, and wow, this is a whole new thrust in Western school philosophy. So these are very important moments in the Western philosophical tradition that recognize the breakthrough of this elementary idea system, the perennial philosophy, into what might be called the school system.